Welcome to Planet Poet Words in Space. I'm your host, Sharon Israel, and it's my great pleasure to welcome award-winning poet Janet Kaplan to the show. Hi, Janet.
Sharon, hello. And I am overly delighted to be on Planet Poet. And I feel like, now I'm just going to add that to my name, Janet Planet Poet. I'm
It's
delighted
my
to be here.
honor,
Thank you.
Janet. I really appreciate you being on the show. I'm going to read your bio for everyone. Janet Kaplan's full-length poetry books are Ecotones, 2022, shortlisted for the Sexton Prize and published by the Black Spring Press Group of London. Dreamlife of a Philanthropist, 2011 Sandeen Prizewinner from the University of Notre Press. The Glazier's Country, 2003 Poets Out Loud Prizewinner from Fordham University Press. And The Groundnote, 1998 Alice James Books. Her collection of And Then is forthcoming from PB&J Books. Her honors include grants from the New York Foundation for the Arts and the Bronx Council on the Arts, fellowships and residencies from the VCCA, Yaddo, Ucross, and the Vermont Studio Center. Her work has appeared in many literary journals and anthologies: An Introduction to the Prose Poem, Firewheel Editions, 2007, Lit from Inside, 40 Years of Poetry from Alice James Books, 2012, and Like Light, 25 Years of Poetry and Prose by Bright Hill Poets and Writers, 2017. Janet has served as poet in residence at Fordham University and as a member of the undergraduate and graduate creative writing faculty at Hofstra University, where she edited the digital literary magazine AMP. Janet, the topic for the show is sort of loosely chaos and creativity. And would you explain that in your work and what you mean by that, please? Thanks.
Yes, and I love that it's a loosely based topic because it's an enormous topic. So chaos and creativity go together like sliced bread and a cheese sandwich. The idea that writers have nothing else to do but write. Um, I don't know who has that idea that an artist just has no other work. Maybe there are a few privileged people who are out there full time at their studio, at their desk, at their keyboard, in their notebooks, eyes on language 24/7. I don't know anyone like that quite personally, but chaos, I mean, um, according to chaos theory, there's no such thing as chaos. It's just a question of perspective, gazing far enough away from the matter, and you see patterns. In the so-called chaos, you see that there are patterns. Um, but I think chaos, at least for me, has to do with, the things in life we can't control and we don't control. I mean, we never could and we never will. Um, and so creativity, in a way, partakes of that, right? There's a sense or need, perhaps, to take chaos, mayhem, uh, mishaps and misfortunes, and make art, some sort of order, right? A chaos theory of one's own. Richard Howard, for my first book, The Groundnote, in his blurb said about me that I love glorious disasters. I don't know that I love them, but went on to say that, but I need to know that order is
Right. And
nearby.
you make glorious work from disasters, perhaps is what he meant.
Perhaps. And sometimes what feels glorious is the act of working, the
Mm-hmm.
act of
Yes.
writing, the act of
Yes.
creating, right?
Right.
It's as if for those moments I am in control.
Mhm.
I'm not thinking about what sick or dead relative needs from me. I'm not, you know, fearful of the countless things I'm afraid of, I'm constructing a sentence, I'm constructing a line, I'm looking for the very best word. I love editing out the words that aren't the best
Hmm.
words and trying my hardest and damnedest to make sure that I've got an image and not an explanation,
I
or
love
a
that. I love that.
semicolon and not a comma. I mean, this to me is can you manage chaos? I don't know, but in those moments, yes,
Hmm.
as a writer,
Or
I
you can
can.
fend it off for a while.
I can fend it off. And then, the more I am able to write and create, the more I fend and my fending muscles strengthen, right? Although, of course, I think any artist or writer will tell you this, with each new piece, there is that dread of the blank space again, as if perhaps what we're diving into is empty of anything but a concrete bottom in which we will die. It does feel like that. But in any case, chaos and creativity.
Janet, you had mentioned a poem by Edna St. Vincent Millay, which it seems dear to you, talking about chaos. Would you read it for us?
I will put chaos into 14 lines by Edna St. Vincent Millay. I will put chaos into 14 lines and keep him there, and let him thence escape if he be lucky. Let him twist and ape, flood, fire, and demon. His adroit designs will strain to nothing in the strict confines of this sweet order, where in pious rape I hold his essence and amorphous shape, till he with order mingles and combines. Past are the hours, the years of our duress, his arrogance, our awful servitude. I have him. He is nothing more nor less than something simple, not yet understood. I shall not even force him to confess or answer. I will only make him good.
That's wonderful. Beautifully read.
Now, this poem was an inspiration for one of the poems in Dreamlife of a Philanthropist called 14 Lines. And we'll talk about a form I use in Dreamlife in a minute. But as far as this poem and its subject matter, think about the fact that she names chaos him. Chaos is a he. It's almost as if she's undoing, in a way, the Pandora myth, right? Or she's adding to it. Pandora's box was actually a jar made of clay, as she was fashioned by the gods. All right. And the jar, of course, we know it contained misfortunes. And then, out of innocent curiosity, Pandora opens the jar and chaos, misfortune escapes. So, what's left in this container? Only one thing: hope. So think of it as poetry being kind of like the hope that remains in the jar, in the box.
Janet, in Dream Life, your book Dream Life of a Philanthropist, you have created a new form called the box poem. I would like you to explain what a box poem is, but before that, just give us a brief explanation of what a prose poem is.
You got it.
Okay,
Let's start with what is a prose poem, right? It sounds like an oxymoron.
exactly.
Um, right. So sometimes, in fact, it's abbreviated proem, Proem.
Ah,
It's a very old form. And if I'm not mistaken, it was kind of invented, discovered, uncovered by French journalists
and Baudelaire did a
in
whole
the
poem.
yes,
Yeah.
in the 19th century. All right, so why do this? Well, when you're reading a newspaper, you're reading prose and it's in paragraph form. The journalists who were also artistic writers decided they were going to fill the paragraph with something surprising, which wasn't exactly the news, but often they used similar techniques as you would use in a well-shaped paragraph. You're looking for sentences that are descriptive, the who, what, where, when, and how, and if not the why. You're looking for, in a sense, the music of the sentence, right? Instead of counting out beats per line, meter, you're looking for the the ways in which each sentence the ways in which each sentence is formed, right, as well as the relationship of one sentence to the next, rhythmically, musically,
Musically, yes,
right?
yes.
Language has rhythm. I mean, you can't speak without having a rhythm, a beat, a measure, if you will. English has one. Yeah, whether we're talking about metered poetry with line breaks or prose poetry, a sentence has a rhythm. La la, la la,
Right.
la la, which is the love dub of the iambic.
Exactly. And also the prose poem is filled with imagery and is not necessarily narrative. And I think the non-linearity of it is what makes it
That's right.
a
So now what
prose
makes it a
prose poem.
poem? Right. What makes it a poem rather than just a paragraph? Well, it's self-contained, okay? A prose poem is generally short. Short meaning a page or less.
Hmm.
Okay? A page of rhythmic prose in which the key element is the image and not the narrative. It doesn't, if it tells a story, the story ends very quickly without plot, without a resolution, without
Yes,
any of
without
those
resolution
things.
in particular.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, my aim and goal when I create prose poetry is not to create a linear narrative.
Janet, would you read Dreamlife of a Philanthropist for us?
Yes,
Thank you.
Dreamlife of a Philanthropist. In the dream, God so loves the world, the people are turned to fish, jellyfish, suitable for inlets. The birds, naturally, remain birds, suitable for trees, which remain trees. Bird language, tree language. Did anyone ever learn enough to pass for native? Likewise, our understanding of machines. Mercy, who wants to be part of any century that will have him? The 14th could have used someone who knew what a germ was to save a gazillion lives by boiling the water and telling them to wash their innocent little hands.
That's Janet Kaplan reading the titular poem from her collection, Dream Life of a Philanthropist. Go ahead, Janet. This is a box poem. Tell us what that is.
Yes, okay, so let me describe what the poem looks like in the book. All right. If you open the page to these so-called box poems, you will see text that is, right and left justified. Okay. Meaning there are no line breaks, number one, because it's a prose poem. Prose poems don't break at a line. And also, it's paragraph in a way, I use the word suitable for, publication in a newspaper, where in the columns, generally speaking, the right-hand margin is
Yes,
flat up.
it's flush. Yeah, it's great.
So it looks like a box, all right? And
Yes.
some of the box poems here are longer than this one, but they're all less than a page in length. And here's the other thing I've done. Because the nature of the prose poem is to show, in a way for me, it has much in common with a painting, a still life, if you will. So I chose with these box poems to place the title of the poem at the bottom of the poem rather than at the top, because that's what you see first when you look at a painting, right? The painting doesn't display its title,
That's right.
right? I mean, you may not have the title anywhere on the painting, all right? I
That's
like
right.
titles, so I wanted them, but I chose to place the title of each of these box poems.
Yeah, I was struck by that when I read them. And could you tell us who influenced you with these box poems?
I will. The mid century sculptor Joseph Cornell. Now, Joseph Cornell, many of your readers will know who he was, and that he created these sculptures, made he constructed boxes like large panoramas, and he filled them with found objects.
Hmm.
So they became containers for, well, seemingly disparate things. Stuffed birds, a stuffed bird swinging on a perch, behind which was a poster for some French hotel. One of those little school dioramas of the solar system.
Cutouts, seriously.
Yeah. I mean, one of his famous ones is Pinball Maryland. So it was, the contents, the stuff from a pinball machine with a big poster of Marilyn Monroe. Um, I mean, basically, what he did was let us know visually that there's nothing that doesn't fit. After
Together.
all, right? It's the universe, right? What doesn't belong in the universe? It's already here.
Right. And the frame of the box is
Yes,
is the common element.
that's right.
So that's
That frame of the box. I knew I had to create poems. I'm not a visual artist. I'm a visual poet.
hmm. Hmm.
Create poems that resembled Cornell's boxes.
And I don't think anybody has done this before. You did. Is that correct?
Well, Joseph Cornell influenced many poets and even fiction writers. And there's even an anthology, a convergence of birds, original fiction and poetry inspired by Joseph Cornell.
Sure. But the form itself, what you've done when you've done with the form.
Yeah, I guess I made a form as much as I could to resemble a sculpture,
Hmm.
a Joseph Cornell box.
Right. And they're very dreamlike. You look at Joseph Cornell work and they create their own worlds.
Let's use the word surrealism. Hmm?
That's what it is. And poems are dreams too, because they're images and they can follow each other without any logical sense, usually, most of the time.
Without any logical sequence, but that they have their own logic. And that's what surrealism is, right? I mean, what is the word? Surrealism, hyper real. Everything in a surrealist painting is a real object. It's just their odd juxtaposition, their relationship or lack of relationship to one another in a logical way that makes for surrealism.
And you're explaining it so clearly. Thank you, Janet. It's really a great conversation with your work and just in general. These concepts are not easy.
I taught and so had to learn how to sort of, explain as clearly as possible in ways in which, never mind the academics, all right. We're talking about what makes art tick,
Yes,
right?
it's not intellectual. It's not intellectual.
And what can help generate wonderful art and joy in for a new poet, right? A brand new bouncing baby poet needs to feel
That's
inspired
so
by
great.
work that's out there that she may not yet understand.
Hmm. Hmm. You have also writing in a style that I've really not known. The the prose sonnet. And you've written one in Dreamlife called Dreams. And would you explain briefly what a prose sonnet is and then read it for
Sure.
us? Thank you.
Sure. So there exist such things, and I was so honored to be in an anthology of prose poetry. Well, Brian Clements was the editor of an anthology, and um, prose sonnets are included in his anthology, mine and wonderful others. So I'm not inventing a form, but perhaps I'm calling it by a name
Okay.
that hadn't been used before. But so, what is a prose sonnet? If prose poem is an oxymoron, surely prose sonnet is even an oxymoron. So for me, it goes back to the idea of containing chaos. And perhaps there's just more chaos in my life, or maybe in general in the world these days. But, a regular sonnet just wasn't going to cut it. I needed more room. All right. So instead of a sonnet, a prose sonnet are, again, no line breaks. All right. But they're 14 very small segments of prose. There are 14 of them, each segment containing maybe a sentence, maybe three, maybe just a phrase or a fragment. And that's what prose sonnets are. And so I'm going to read from Dreamlife of a Philanthropist, prose sonnet titled Dreams.
Thank you, Janet.
1. The body is a notebook filled with dreams, the ones you call disturbing. 2. Droplet and memory meet. This is where I get off. Want to know where? You want to know? They were in each other's way, yelling at each other's yells. It smells, said Memory Meat. The train always smells. Shut up, shut up, shut up. Memory Meat in green plaid, Droplet in a schmutz coat, slept and fumed. 3. Red accidents, intruders, a list of experiments, letters for money. If the natural world understands us, if there's a place of origin for signs and symbols where they're loved without context. 4. The dreamer is held aloft, a flower up from a grave. 5. Sea lions, lemurs, poodles, all of them lifelike. 6. By morning, the sensation of fear will run pleasantly through your body. 7. It is always 3 a.m. The neighbors wrestle with God. The dog hobbles off on its 3 good legs. My parents, in their room next to mine, argue whether I use too much or too little toilet paper. All 3 at once, the clams and their shells sing Latin. 8. Word equals shard. Meaning equals stained shard. 9. Ovens. I'm waiting in the oven for them to come to their senses. I have a guitar, a kind of oven, which I play while pressing through the crowd, collecting coins. 10. Form. A cup, a field, a universe, a cat, a rose, a stray book. What is my waking address? A devil, a form, a form, a form. 11. Rapid eye movement. Wind that blows away the heat-shrunk heads of tulips. Rain. wanting to have a child, hearing myself say to it, I am a mouth. You can be anything. The ocean worked out a similar arrangement with the salt. 12. He went like that, said Sam Spade, like a fist when you open your hand. 13. The tongue at rest, curled under. I'm powerless to choose the figures in my dreams. Likewise, they're powerless to choose being dreamt. 14. Then this too rushes away.
That's Jenna Kaplan reading her prose sonnet, Dreams, from her book Dreamlife of a Philanthropist. I love the rhythm that these create. You get the three sentence segment, the one sentence segment. It's all over. I love the one about form. I found that very moving for some reason. I mean, they all are. I can't say. I love the schmutz coat and the clams in Latin, and then you get very lyric, and then it's all done. It's really
It's all on the subway. Really, I think that a lot of these poems started on my morning commutes when I was working in publishing, taking the subway. And if I was done with a newspaper or whatnot, I took notes. This was way before cell phones. Oh my God.
yeah. It's
So
just great. It works together so
what else can you do
beautifully.
but write things?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And write like this is pretty
Stare
good.
at people and then write things. So they don't know you're staring.
That's great.
Anyway.
You are listening to Planet Poet Words in Space on WIOX Community Radio. I'm your host Sharon Israel, and I'm here with the fabulous award-winning poet Janet Kaplan. And Janet, I want to ask you to introduce your next book, or the book that has arrived in 2022, Ecotones. And tell us a
Yes.
bit about it, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon. So, I'm going to read actually the sort of uh, explanation page. It's not exactly a forward to the book Ecotones. What is an ecotone anyway? An ecotone comes from the word ecology, in Greek tonos, meaning tension. But an ecotone is a place where natural habitats intersect and converge. An example, a forest joins up with a meadow merges with marshland, or a marshland edges the sea, right? So in an ecotone, habitats converge and create, in a way, a new thing, right? The writer Akiko Bush, in a New York Times op-ed piece way back in 2013, an op-ed titled Life on the Edge, she extends the definition of an ecotone to refer to a place where past and present converge. And so, I actually am following Kiko Bush and extending the definition of an ecotone, from a natural habitat to a page, a page of text on which past and present poetry, fictional narrative, and scientific, especially computer and historical texts intersect
Ah,
and converge.
so it's sort of like an ecological niche, if you would.
Way, I mean, to say that the poems in Ecotones do have, in terms of theme, one of the themes is environmental degradation, um, photo
Yeah.
decomposition,
I love the
right?
way you've imaginatively thought of the page as a natural habitat. It's sort of like the box poem too. It's a beautiful way
In a
of
way,
looking at it.
yeah. I mean, this is, a blank page, or a blank piece of screen. It's a natural canvas when you think about it. It is for a writer. This is the place of creation. And why not, I mean, going back to why not put everything in? Doesn't everything
Yes.
fit?
Yes, and on the page, there's a lot of space, and you work with space. You work with the empty space on the page. Could you tell us a little bit about that? I just thought of that.
Sure. And fair warning to your readers, Ecotones is really a visual project
Yes.
because of all the different kinds of texts and information, I chose not only to space them out so that they're, what we call an open field, right?
Hmm.
But also to use different fonts. So
Okay.
I'm going to try when I read a few of these pieces to change my voice a little bit, not to be
Oh,
funny, but just to kind
no.
of indicate a change, right? I don't know, perhaps that's enough of a definition of my book, Ecotones, but we're going to focus on the first section of Ecotones, which is titled Plasma. So plasma, the word itself has so many definitions.
Why don't you read hello first?
Okay. So yeah, Hello is an early poem in the section titled Plasma from Ecotones. Orchard beach and blanket throngs. Wandering off meant trailing wet sand edges, shorelines glare and shriek. Kids, gulls. Beyond the jetties, rocky pools. Stand of trees. Heading back, you lose them. The sleeping mother and the father, transistor's ballgame voice, their red-black thermos of gin, a softness undone, harsher than fear. They're drunk, never noticed you were gone, belying your lostness. But here they are, sunlight's knives, their acceptance of your nothingness. Charles Babbage on Ada Lovelace, England, 1843. Forget this world and all its troubles, and if possible, its multitudinous charlatans, everything in short, but the enchantress of numbers. Ada language, developed for the United States Department of Defense. With Ada.text underscore IO semicolon, use Ada.text underscore IO semicolon. Procedure. Hello is begin. Put underscore line. Hello world semicolon. End hello semicolon.
That's Janet Kaplan reading hello from her volume Ecotones. It's so wonderful because it contains a lot, and the first part is so lyric, and the Orchard Beach is in the Bronx, very lyric.
Yes.
And then I'm noticing because I'm seeing the page itself, and you didn't read it linearly. You didn't read it down the page. You changed it, which I kind of liked.
Well,
It's
I
interesting.
think that for radio listeners, it
Uh-huh.
makes more sense to attribute each of the quotes, if you will, right away rather than as footnotes, because then it's like, well, wait, what are these footnotes, yeah, referring to? So yes, you'll forgive me for making that little adjustment for the listening.
No, I'm glad we I mentioned it because it
Yeah,
explains more
yeah, yeah, yeah.
and it
Right,
describes
sure,
more.
sure.
And they all do fit together. It's
I mean,
it is tell us
yeah.
about that.
Well, I mean, they do, and they do in a slant.
Uh-huh.
I mean, let's give Emily Dickinson her due. Tell it slant. Now, this is a mixture of fictional narrative. Um, it's lyrical fiction, short fragments. Uh, some other poems do contain line broken poems or poem fragments. Um, but I'm telling in plasma, in a way, a story broken and in fragments and with great hesitation, a fictional story of a contemporary woman's struggle with addiction, merging it with our addiction as a race, as a human race, for durable goods, plastic especially, and I mean, matching it and pairing it, creating an ecotone of past and present. Women's oppression, for example, the oppression and the uses of nature, right?
And Ada Lovelace, who was a pioneer, of course, in
And Ada
computer
Lovelace,
technology.
Ada Lovelace, that's right. She's often credited as being the first person to invent, create something like a computer language, an understanding of a machine that will remember and generate
And
uh,
is that what you mean by
information.
I'm sorry, textual convergence also, all of these things converging?
Well, yes, right. So, in other words, I'm bringing to bear on the page not only a narrative and poetry, but also snippets of scientific information, computer information, and also photo decomposition and other environmental, information. The degradation and the oppression of women, um, in a historical context as well as modern.
So you create this
Um,
this new edge, this new convergence, which is
right.
there.
Yes, that's right.
Janet,
That's
would
right.
you read another one from Ecotones called Work?
Right. It's
Would you?
actually at the ampersand at work.
I'm sorry,
Like
at work.
people's handle.
Oh, of
Like
course.
people's handle, like on the former Twitter. Briefly, let me explain. I use a handmade a pictograph slash cuneiform symbol at the beginning of almost each of the lines of this piece. And some of them have the pound symbol, right? Which is, what we use, in tagging. All right. So I'm merging or converge. There's a convergence of ancient, pictorial symbols for language and contemporary symbols for language at work. Pictograph barley, circa 3011 BC. Barley cake. Cuneiform barley, circa 2900 BC. Pound. You mustn't keep writing to me, you wrote to your child. It wasn't nostalgia, wasn't longing, wedging open time. It was their job. We mustn't consider it an act of love. This tablet records a quantity of barley. Pound. When I was young, you wrote, grown-ups fought all the time. Pound. Later, we tried to love, even when it was work. Pound. Even when it was work, we tried to stop. Pound. I'm very sick now. I don't have time for you. Scribes had to account for the barley. Every sheath brought in as tax for the king. New section. Explosive plasma. Light quanta to molten core. Even at bottom, light exists. Seafloor to abyssal, midnight to twilight, sunlight to garbage island suspension. Your home to someone else's. I, thou to they. They had to keep tabs.
Hmm. That's Janet Kaplan reading At Work from Ecotones. And tell us why this is in the plasma section. And just tell us a little bit about it. I'm fascinated that cuneiform was started as a practical thing to keep records.
Absolutely. It
Not
was,
no
it was,
romanticism there.
that's right. So this is information, facts on the ground, that cuneiform is shaped, the instrument to create it, to stamp a symbol into a wet clay tablet, um, was shaped to resemble stalks of barley. Why? Well, that's how people in, Sumer, in Mesopotamia,
Mhm.
paid their taxes to the king in sheaths of barley. And so imagine the poor scribe. It was that person, that his job to record these things, mark them up. How many sheaves of barley did this farmer bring in this year? And after a while, how many sheaves of barley can you actually draw on? So some clever person invented an implement, a writing implement, that had a kind of triangle shape with a tail. And then you could use that shape and turn the triangle pointing up, pointing left, pointing right, pointing down, or more, a sequence of them facing to the right, instead of drawing sheaves of barley.
Oh,
Language. Yay, hurrah.
yeah.
So why is this in plasma? Well, plasma has, any number of meanings. And maybe we can segue into that. But I'm also here talking about the ways in which, you know, perhaps for practical reasons, and heartbreakingly so, we do begin to split away from natural relationship with objects and with one another. All right. So, what happens when the king is no longer interested in his subjects as people, but just the taxes? The taxes begin to represent something,
Abstract.
loosely,
Yeah.
abstract and loosely based on life for practical reasons.
Hmm, hmm.
Nevertheless, um, I'm weaving this into the fictional account of a woman who has gone through emotional degradation and addiction, and who has lost touch with a child, and toward
Hmm,
the end of her life is saying, I don't have time for you.
hmm.
In her illness and her sickness, she's just had to abstract her child. And then the idea that we ever lose anything, of course, is not true. Talking about plastic, which is related, etymologically to plasma, the idea that something could be created that you can bend, but it won't break. And we know, of course, that plastic is indestructible. And so what happens to it is it biodegrades, um, add sunlight, add water, and it becomes, microparticle, and it's eaten by algae, which, and that's eaten by small marine life, fish, birds, us. We have all of us plastic in us.
Thank you, Janet. That's great. I want you to, we have time for you to read from your work in progress, and that's with an ampersand, and then in small letters.
Right.
And would you tell us a little bit about that, or?
Right. So, and then, okay, great. And then, as a work in progress, if I tell you that the work started when I was 13 years old, Uh, uh,
I love it.
when I was obsessively writing in diaries and writing down my dreams,
Hmm.
and God, how many notebooks? Hundreds.
You still have
I
all your
kept,
notebooks? You
well, no, but
okay?
I just randomly kept some. I don't know. In any case, um, um, shortly after a rather difficult nervous breakdown in my mid-20s.
Mm.
One of my sane-making tasks I assigned myself was to read over my dreams in each diary from year one through, and copy out the poems in order of subject matter.
Mm.
So a lot of us have dreams that ring somehow on some you know um human symbolic level, like falling out teeth, or fear of annihilation,
Mm-hmm.
all of these things.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So once I'd copied them down, it took forever to then realize, wait a minute, what I have here are these sort of odd stories and poems. Anyway, and then is going to be published by a cooperative press. So I'm a member of the board. I edit. I'm a co-publisher, and I'm delighted that
Oh, wonderful.
the next book out from the cooperative press will be "And Then," when I
Yay.
can manage to
I, ha- I have
finish editing.
I
Now,
have I have to
and
ask you.
then,
I'm sorry. Is PB&J peanut butter and jelly?
well, yes, but it's
Okay.
also acronyms for our first names.
Oh, I love it.
The three
That's great.
cooperative board members. I'm Janet, obviously, Jelly. There's a Peter and a Bruce.
Great.
And in any case, and then, well, that's a standard sort of "and next," because in this book I am merging, mixing up, mashing up a prose poem with prose, short fiction.
Okay.
Some of these are short fiction, and some are prose poems.
Mm-hmm. So it's a hybrid, what's called a hybrid form these days.
Okay, it's a hybrid book. Um, in other words, some of the poems have an "and then." What happens next? I'm very excited by this. I've never written um, prose fiction before. I haven't. So, and after all, poetry itself, I think, is a plastic medium. It's a plastic medium. What is a poem? The definition of that expands, and it always has, to include things that, if you're publishing fiction and you've got poetry in there, it's like, what? Get out of here. You're a poet. You don't belong. I'm going to read a piece from "And Then," titled "Return." Returns. I offer a bowl of my own milk to the red heifer, and she drinks. And now the bowl contains a snake. I offer a pomegranate to the snake, and the snake eats. I offer the pomegranate tree to the ground, and the rain accepts the wood, the flesh, and the fruit, and the soil that grew them. I'm as close to the wild world as floodwater. Like floodwater, I run down subway stairs and sewage drains, across fields of elephant tusks and uprooted roots, rising with the sea, wave after wave. Phones are charged, flags fly at full mast, church bells ring their hours. There's a sudden leafing in the night. Plants grow beneath their high-intensity lamps. When the lamps go out, liverworts and mosses pitch their shallow roots, and cryptospores spread their spores. Undersea bacteria belch oxygen from their slimy coats. I offer lightning and fire and say, let there be. Letting is an expansive concept. I think of rooms to let and spheres, and I'm struck by how little has changed. I strike myself as the same form, the same current, the same I what sees. I let there be leftovers, clippings, exchanges, and returns. A quiet sense of remorse for the shapes that didn't work, didn't last in this climate or in that age. Whether they worked in some other time or place, or will in the future, Doesn't matter. I'll offer and offer until it's all returned to me.
Mm. That's Janet Kaplan reading Returns from her new book. And then you consider this prose, but it's so lyric.
This one's more prose poem
Yeah, because it's not,
in its
it's sort
use
of,
of,
it's narrative, sort of,
uh,
it's on that
but
edge.
it has poetic properties, the use of
It
repetition,
does. Yeah.
imagery, it's image based. There's
Mhm.
movement in it, but it's certainly not a linear narrative. And
No, but it's also
yeah,
the music of it,
turns,
the beautiful, the
yeah,
language
there's
of it.
musicality.
Yeah, it's
Absolutely.
very different.
Musicality. Right, right. I think this next one is more prose fiction than prose poem. Inside from And Then. His body is an apartment building with an elevator. He takes the elevator down to the basement where his father lives, in a corridor lined with discards and trash cans. His father has a tin basin for catching rainwater when it leaks in. His father wants him to live there and take care of him. He takes the elevator down below the basement. The ride seems endless. At one level is a museum of industry. At a lower level, there's a sewer. At the lowest level, he's outside. A wild goat skitters across the grass and up a cliff. He shares an apartment on an upper floor of the apartment building. Dozens of people live there. There's no furniture. It's a noisy, echoey place. Sometimes, tired of the noise, he'll throw a bomb out the window. They always come back. He alerts the other tenants whenever the bomb returns, but his father always knows when the bombs will return. His father grew up near the bomb factory in a brick house surrounded by wire. The bomb factory had so much equipment that they stored some in his house. There was barely room to move for fear of setting something off. That house was abandoned years ago, but the man senses that it's been inside him all along.
Wow. That's Janet Kaplan reading Inside from her work in progress. And then the body is yet another a container.
Yes. And isn't it
It's
here in this
amazing.
particular in this particular poem, it's clear to me that the body the body is containing uh, familial past trauma, generational
Mm.
trauma, right? I mean, um, just the nearness of destruction, war, unspeakable things leading to, um, you know, um, disaffectation, isolation, harm to others, even a child, all of those
Yes.
things that we stay with, whether they're conscious or not.
And it's on the page it looks very expansive, but it's quite claustrophobic because it's in
Sure,
this
sure.
particular
That's right.
container, even though it's an apartment house, it's always sort of breathing in and out with that. It's incredibly imaginative, I have to say. Thank you, Janet.
I think the idea of the body containing or dreaming, say, of an elevator going up and down, the subconscious levels
Yes,
being in the
yes, of
sub
course,
basement,
of
yeah.
course.
But I needed to particularize that and flesh it out. Yeah.
So emotional. You contain so much emotion, and it's description. It's
Yeah,
all imagery. It's nothing.
sure, it is.
You don't have
Sure.
to mention anything about emotion at all. It's a
Well,
so
right. We don't want to do that.
no.
We don't want to do that because that's not emotion. That's not saying, naming an emotion is not the
Hmm,
emotion.
hmm,
So the
hmm.
best way to get at it is with an image. After all, images came before language in our development.
Ah, yes.
we start hearing and then dreaming, perhaps even in the womb,
Mm.
certainly as infants, even, before our eyes open up.
Janet,
So
I can't thank you enough for this show. It's been such a deep and beautiful experience, and I'm sure my listeners feel the same way. And
well, I'm
especially
so
for
grateful to you and to
ah
them for listening.
especially for the poets. Well, I shouldn't say that for everybody, but you've given so much food for me as a poet, and I'm sure for the other poets that are listening. And
It's been an
great.
enormous joy.
Oh, thank you so
Even
much.
talking about misfortune and chaos with you, Sharon.
Oh,
Um, I'm so happy
thank you.
and
Thank you so
grateful
much.
to you
Thank you so
and
much.
Planet Poet. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, and thank you all for listening.